Hello AP Biology students, let's go over the 14th section in Unit 7. And in this section, we're going to continue our talks about taxonomy. We're going to start mapping out evolution. In this section, we're basically going to be looking at how we show how close or how far away two species are related to each other. One of the ways that we chart out evolution is by using something called a cladogram. This is just a diagram that shows the relationships between different species based on their characteristics. You can see in this cladogram, we have many different species at the top and different adaptations that have evolved along the way. These cladograms show us how closely two species are related to each other based on their shared characteristics. A term that I use a lot when going over this section is the term of common ancestor. This is the last organism that is going to be related to two or more species. A common ancestor for you and your siblings is your parents. A common ancestor between you and your cousins is your grandparents. You and I share a common ancestor if we go back far enough. Now, it might be thousands and thousands of years ago, but it's still a common ancestor that is the last organism that we're both related to. Now, take that concept of common ancestry with like people and think about it with other species. I know it's crazy to think about, but we are related to all life on Earth, which means we have a common ancestor with all life on Earth. If you look at species like trees, we have to go back millions to billions of years to find that common ancestor. Now, related to common ancestry is the topic of a clade. This is a common ancestor and all of its descendants. If you look, this is not a clade because it's not one common ancestor and all of its descendants, while this one up here is a clade because it's a common ancestor and all of its descendants. Same thing on this side. This is not a clade because it's not a common ancestor and all of its descendants. You can see we're leaving this descendant out. While up here, this is a clade because it's a common ancestor and all of its descendants. Now, one of the ways that we look at how species are related is through something called ancestral traits. And these are traits that are common because of a common ancestor. You can see this is an ancestral trait because all of the species, that's A, B, C, and D, have that trait. A derived trait is not common to all of the ancestors, which means it evolved along the way. More specifically, it is unique to certain species on a particular cladogram. You can see that, like, say right here, this green trait evolved before B, C, and D, so all of those species have that derived trait. However, A doesn't have that trait because it's on a different limb or lineage, so only B, C, and D have this derived trait. For another example, you can see this blue trait right here is only unique to B and C. D doesn't have it and A doesn't have it. Typically, these derived traits are more helpful at separating species and showing how closely two species may be related. We also have something called phylogenetic trees, which are very closely related to cladograms. The only major really big difference between a phylogenetic tree and a cladogram is that phylogenetic trees show time. So basically, these separation points or speciation events are going to be really important when looking at how two species are related because it shows that time frame when they evolved from each other. These nodes show where a speciation event took place. So you can see mice and humans had a speciation event that occurred millions and millions and millions of years ago. That speciation event is that branching point or the node. Now, mice and humans also have a common ancestor with a fly, but that speciation event occurred even further back. One last concept to go over here is something known as an outgroup, and this is a species that does not fit into a clade or an in-group. This helps us identify what is in the clade and what is not in the clade. You can see this outgroup showing that species does not belong to this in-group or the clade.